New research on Pompeii has revealed something that changes the whole story. Most of the people who died at Pompeii didn't die because they had no warning. They had hours, some had most of a day, and it wasn't even the first warning. This isn't a story about a surprise disaster. It's a story about the people who saw it coming, twice, and stayed anyway. Pompeii, a prosperous Roman city on the Bay of Naples, home to an estimated 10 to 20,000 people. Wine bars on every street corner, bathhouses, grand villas with mosaic floors and painted walls. Right beside it, the smaller town of Herculaneum, closer to the coast, home to wealthy Romans with seaside villas. Both sat in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. Vesuvius hadn't erupted in living memory, which is exactly why nobody saw this coming. Romans didn't think of it as a volcano at all. They thought of it as a mountain. 17 years earlier, in the year 62, the city got its first warning. Almost nobody connected it to what came next. A major earthquake struck Pompeii and Herculaneum. Public buildings collapsed. Water systems were destroyed, homes were flattened. It was so severe that some ancient writers described it as if the whole region had nearly been erased. Rebuilding began immediately, but 17 years later, some of it still wasn't finished. The city's own Temple of Jupiter was still under repair, scaffolding and all, on the day Vesuvius finally erupted. Across the bay, at the naval base of Misenum, the Roman fleet's commander was a man named Pliny the Elder, a scholar, an author, and the person who happened to be in charge of the only military force close enough to help when everything went wrong. With him that day, his teenage nephew, Pliny the Younger. Decades later, he would write the only surviving eyewitness account of what happened, in 2 letters to the historian Tacitus. It remains the first detailed description of a volcanic eruption in human history. Everything we know about these 2 days, we know largely because of a teenager who survived and never forgot what he saw. Early afternoon, August 24th, Vesuvius erupts. A column of ash and pumice shoots miles into the sky, then begins raining down on Pompeii. This next part matters most. This first phase wasn't fast. It lasted roughly 18 hours. Ash and pumice fell steadily, but slowly enough that anyone who chose to leave the city that afternoon had a real chance to get out alive. Across the bay, Pliny the Elder got word that people near the mountain needed help, including a friend named Rectina. He made a decision that would define the rest of the story. Instead of sailing away from the eruption, he ordered his fleet to sail toward it. His nephew, watching from the shore, chose to stay behind with his mother and study, a choice that would save his life. He reached the coastal town of Stabii, at the home of his friend Pomponianus, who was terrified and preparing to flee. And Pliny, trying to project calm, did something almost unbelievable. He took a bath. He ate dinner. He rested. By the time he realized how serious the danger truly was, the wind had turned against him. Meanwhile, in Pompeii, roofs were starting to collapse under the weight of the falling debris. And in Herculaneum, a very different group made a very different choice. Roughly 300 people fled to the beach, hoping for rescue by sea. They crowded into a row of stone boat chambers along the shoreline and waited. The sea in front of them had become too violent to cross. They had nowhere left to go. Everything up to this point was survivable. What happens in the next few hours wasn't. In the early hours of the next morning, the eruption entered its second, far deadlier phase. The column of ash collapsed under its own weight, sending pyroclastic surges, fast-moving clouds of superheated gas and volcanic material reaching roughly 500 degrees Celsius, racing down the mountain at high speed. This is what killed almost everyone who had stayed. The people sheltering in Herculaneum's boat chambers died almost instantly from thermal shock. The heat was so extreme it carbonized everything organic around them. Their remains were reduced to skeletons in seconds. Compare that to Pompeii itself, where cooler ash preserved victims' bodies as void casts instead. Same eruption, 2 completely different deaths. At Stabii, Pliny the Elder tried to escape by sea, but the same wind that had carried him in now trapped him on shore. Overcome by the toxic gases, he collapsed on the beach and died. His body was found 2 days later, reportedly showing no visible wounds. He hadn't been struck by anything. The air itself had killed him. When it was over, an estimated 2,000 people had died in Pompeii alone. That's out of a population that may have numbered 10 to 20,000. Across the wider region, researchers think the death toll reached into the thousands more. Here's the flip side of that number. Most of Pompeii's population probably did survive. They left during those first 18 hours, while there was still time. And both cities disappeared so completely that within a few generations, people had largely forgotten exactly where they stood. For almost 1,700 years, Pompeii stayed buried and mostly forgotten. Then, in 1748, digging began under King Charles VII of Naples, originally just to loot artwork for his personal collection. An inscription found a few years later confirmed exactly which city they'd found. But the most haunting discovery came over a century later. In 1863, archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli noticed something. The ash around some victims had hardened perfectly around their bodies before those bodies decayed away, leaving human-shaped hollows underground. Fiorelli's idea was simple and brilliant. Pour liquid plaster into the hollow, let it set, then carefully chip away the surrounding ash. What came out were exact, three-dimensional casts of the people who died, the same haunting images that appear in almost every photo of Pompeii today. And Pompeii still isn't finished giving up its secrets. As recently as this year, archaeologists uncovered what's being called a once-in-a-century find, a massive private bathhouse, one of the largest ever discovered in the city, big enough to hold 30 people at once. Nearly 2,000 years later, this city is still being excavated, one room at a time. Pompeii wasn't a story about a mountain that struck without warning. It was a story about two warnings: an earthquake 17 years earlier, and 18 hours of falling ash, and a group of people who, for 100 different human reasons, didn't leave in time. Some stayed to help others. Some stayed to protect what they owned. Some just didn't believe it would get worse. All of them ran out of time in the same hours everyone else had to escape. That's unlucky history.